Nicky, and thank you for making time for our interview this morning.
Thank you very much.
Now, can you tell us briefly more about yourself and more about the Nicky Okoye organization?
Okay, well, myself, I have been in the area of development for quite a while, all forms of development. So I started off a career in financial systems, working with Merrill Lynch in the United States of America. Merrill Lynch is now the Bank of America Merrill Lynch. At the time I was there, it was one of the most reputable investment banks in the world. And then after the 2008 crisis, Bank of America acquired Merrill Lynch. But because the brand was so strong, they kept the name. So they called it Bank of America Merrill Lynch. So I've been in that industry, came back to Nigeria and also helped with developing the financial systems and financial markets of Nigeria, working as Chief Strategy Officer of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. At the time I joined the stock exchange, Nigeria, there were less than about 2 million Nigerians investing in stocks. And it was a very old system. A lot of folks used to hold on to physical certificates and put these certificates in frames on the wall. So we had a lot of work to do to get the Nigerian people to dematerialize their share certificates, start using electronic trading, electronic depository, electronic systems, and we also opened up the Nigerian capital market to the world. So we went around the world. I actually organized over 35 roadshows, investment roadshows, to fund managers, investors, and even Nigerians in diaspora across the world to start investing in Nigerian capital markets, Nigerian securities. And then in that process, we came to realize that we needed to provide the international markets with more information on Nigerian systems, markets. Got the companies to start putting together investor relations websites where they could upload information on their performances and so on. So we were able to give the Nigerian capital markets a brand new structure, which has enhanced the ability of entrepreneurs and businesses to create jobs and to respond to market opportunities. And then after that, I helped to set up a company called Transcorp. Transcorp is a company that, an idea I shared with the President of Nigeria at that time, President Obasanjo, when I was still in the United States. And when we came back to Nigeria, he wanted, Obasanjo really loves Nigeria. Of course. So no matter what people say about him, so he wanted Nigeria to expand globally. And so this idea kind of resonated with his vision for Nigeria, and the idea was that Nigeria should have a global company that does business across Africa and across the world. And so he asked some of the top entrepreneurs in Nigeria to come together and look at this idea, and we eventually formed what we call the Transnational Corporation of Nigeria. Transnational Corporation of Nigeria is actually a concept. So any company that is doing business across borders is referred to as a transnational corporation.
Okay, that's where the name came from.
So we just stuck with the name. So we stuck with the name, but the concept was to build a transnational corporation of Nigeria which could do business across the world, so across national borders. And so we just stuck with the name Transcorp because nobody could agree on what name to use. So I became this first chief executive actually. First of all, as a technical and executive secretary of the committee that was putting it together, and then eventually chief operating officer and group executive director for strategy and operations. And then I led with the acquisition of over 9 different acquisition transactions in privatization, representing over $12 billion. So I had a lot of experience gained a lot of experience in early acquisitions, buy side advisory, buy-side acquisition, capital funding, capital raising. So what I was doing in stock exchange, I now became an operator in Nigeria in the market, learning how to raise capital, and subsequently raised over $1 billion in a short pace of about 12 months.
Wow!
And Transcorp became a $1 billion company in less than a year.
That's amazing.
Based on the so what the Americans would call a unicorn.
Okay, literally a unicorn.
Yes, so it was regarded then as one of the most outstanding and unprecedented capital raising exercises in the history of Nigerian capital markets.
I'm sure it sounds like it. Okay, so what about the Nicky Okoye organization? We've heard a lot about what you've done.
Yeah, so basically what I'm doing is to take the experiences and the learning that I have gained over the years in my career and give back to society. And the way I'm giving back is to help companies, entrepreneurs, businesses across Africa to gain access to capital that they would use to build sustainable business models. Some of this capital is in the private hands. So in the United States, for instance, capital is divided into several categories.
Yes.
So you have people in the private equity world, for instance, or the venture capital world, or international financial institutions. All that is privately managed funding. Now, the challenge with those folks is that they're very stringent, they're very jealous, if you will, of their capital, and they are they stick to, if your country has just a little bit of risk, they pull back, But then there are other forms of capital, and so these other forms of capital include what we call sovereign capital. And sovereign is capital that is run or controlled by a nation, a national government. Now, in that respect, you have sovereign funds. This is actual funding that governments are running, and they have fund managers that manage it on their behalf. Or you have sovereign guarantees. Sovereign guarantees is actually the best way, which is where governments put aside an amount of money and they use it to support buying goods and services, plants and machinery or technology from their country or from their suppliers. Now, anybody who wants to access funding like that means that you will work closely with either a country's Exim Bank, an export bank, or a country's development bank. So for instance, with the United States, they have what we call the Prosper Africa Initiative. That is an initiative that has set aside about $60 billion.
Wow.
Exactly, to support African businesses to do business with the United States. So the Nicky Okoye organization organizes roadshows and provides access to companies that want to access this kind of money. So it's not just for those folks who want to do American acquisitions or American funding. We can do that with Europe, we can do that with China as well. And then, so this is what we call the sovereign guaranteed funds. So we focus on that for now because a lot of the risk factors, especially for Nigeria and Western Africa, are much higher for the private equity or for the private international financial institutions. So the risk profile for the sovereign funds is much lower, and because it's more of a loan in that, and that money goes towards buying machinery, buying plants, it's easier to access that kind of funding. And the good news is that the companies that access that kind of funding, once you get approved for those loans, the private equity folks and the folks who bring the equity will come and start looking for you.
Wow.
Yes, because it makes sense. It makes sense. You've already gotten your funding. You've gotten 10, 20 or $30 million in debt. And that obviously means you're off to the races as a business person. So the equity people will definitely come looking for you because they know that you're up and running.
Dr. Nicky, over the years, you've demonstrated a passion for strategy, leadership, and entrepreneurship. So can you talk to us more about your insight on those topics?
Yes, I think that one of the areas that I have gained a lot of experience is in leadership. And I have actually helped to set up what I call the Nigerian Leadership Summit, which I convened. And that was an opportunity to demonstrate the lack of leadership in Nigeria, or the lack of the leadership skills, if you will. And we were able to grow to one of the largest privately organized summits in the country. We had over 4,000 delegates and over 50,000 used to sign up and watch us. We ran it for about 7 years, every year. We had one early this year as well. So we're still doing that. But what it has effectively helped me to realize is that companies, countries, organizations, even communities rise and fall on the strength of the leadership.
Very true.
On the strength of the innovation of the leadership. So if you have innovative leadership, if you have committed leadership, the chances are you're going to succeed as a company, as a society, even as a country. And if you don't have innovative leadership, then the chances are you're going to fail. And so leadership has become extremely important. I have learned that the hard way. And so I do my best to use my platforms, both the non-profit platform as well as the for-profit platforms, to support leadership across the board. And so I've advised in an informal capacity 2 presidents of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I've advised in a formal capacity 2 governors of the central bank as consultants and advisors. I've advised in a formal capacity the CEO of the stock exchange, which I actually helped to remodel the place and to provide a structure. And so, and then I've been a serial entrepreneur myself, which is I set up a phone manufacturing company a while ago, Annabelle Mobile, and that particular phone was a smartphone which we introduced into Africa and Nigeria in 2008.
Really? So you're a bit ahead of the iPhone
We
and all that craze.
We were ahead of ourselves,
wow.
eventually, because we ran out of steam early.
Okay.
Because we had the owns to educate the marketplace on the use of smartphones. People didn't understand what smartphones were.
Okay.
They didn't understand they could get their email on smartphone. They could chat on a smartphone. All these things that people take for granted now. We had to go out and hold seminars and hold.
Wow.
Yes, we were educating the public. So we spent a fortune educating the public.
So now,
and then we ran out of steam, and then the iPhones and the Blackberries of the world came and had our lunch.
Okay.
But the important